Hi and welcome to today's video. So today I'll be showing you how to create the front end of a school management system where we can actually add a new student as you want. Let's try adding a student into the system. Let's give them a random class. Let's actually make sure the age, let's set this to 2004, and you can actually choose any month of your choice. Then you can actually choose any day of your choice. Then you can actually set any site. Let's say Charlotte. For the address, Charlotte, North Carolina, and then we're going to set a random phone number. Then if we go and type the email, we can now add the student, and then we'll always see the student has been inserted successfully. Then once the student is inserted, we can actually sort by gender. We can choose the male, we can choose the female, then we can also choose which class that we're actually looking for, as you can see right. Yes, you can actually choose grade 6. Let's see who's in grade 6. It's actually working well. And now we can also search by student, as you can see right here. So everything is actually working perfectly. And then you can actually have the double buttons here that will actually enable us to have actions for this work. How do we do this? Find out in today's video. Alright, so first of all, let's open Qt Designer. Then inside here, now we're going to reload an old project we had been working on. So remember the project of school that we'd actually been working on. So I'm going to go and click open. So I'd saved this project on our desktop. So it was the project we had called school. And then inside here, we'd actually created a UI file. Let's open it. And as you can see, this was the project that we had worked on. And now we're going to continue and build up from there. So we're going to add a space for a QTable. Then we're also going to include room for adding students. So we're going to have a dialog that pops up whenever I click on a button. So that's what we're going to be doing. Right, so now first of all, we're going to create a new template. So we're going to create a new template. We're going to call it dialog with let's actually do it without buttons. That won't matter. Let's click create. Let's go to the bottom, and here it is right here. So now this is the dialog we're going to be working with. So now we're going to give it some dimensions. So we're going to give it height. So go to where we actually have its height right here. Let's actually work on the height here. We're going to set that height to 584. Click enter. Now you can actually set the height as adjusted. Now we're going to set the width to 548. Alright, so that's how we're going to have it right here. Then we're going to go here with this dialog, and we're going to rename this students dialog and click enter. Then we're also going to save this dialog file one more time. So go and click save as. So back here in the same folder as school, we're actually going to save it right there. So we're going to call it student dialog.ui. Right, so at the top I'm going to share a link to the video that I'd actually worked on prior to this one, so that you can actually continue and see where we had actually started from. Alright, so first of all, I'm going to insert some horizontal lines. So search for horizontal line, and here we go. Drag it in and place it right at the top. Then we can actually stretch this out. Right, so there we go, we have it. And then we're now going to insert some labels. So search for labels, and we're going to drag this in. Let's first stretch this out. Then we're going to change the text to add new student. Then click enter. Now we're going to go here, click here. Then we're going to search for Poppins. And inside Poppins here, let's actually try semi-bold. Then we're going to search for font size of 20 and click OK. And there we go. Let's actually position this a little bit to the top, clicking on the up arrow. Alright, so now we're going to insert some other label. So we're going to change the text to full name. Stretch this out. Alright, then we're going to change the font to Poppins. Change the font size to 12. Then stretch this out. There we go. And we're going to search for a QLineEdit. So search for LineEdit, place it right below this. Then we're going to search for its height here, and we're just going to make sure it has a height of 35. So that shall act both as the maximum and minimum height. So make sure this is also set to 35, copy and paste. Then this shall also be set to 35. So it's going to be the maximum and minimum height. Then we're going to select both of these, select this and that. Then we're going to align. So we're aligning vertically. Then you can now stretch this out again. And there we go. So now we have it. Now we're going to make duplicates of this. So select this horizontal, the vertical alignment here. Then click duplicate. So I've actually duplicated more than once. That was the intention. And I need to have one more. Ctrl C, Ctrl V. Alright, so now we're going to be making use of these. Alright, so now next I'm now going to insert some combo boxes. So search for combo boxes. And here we go. This is going to be my first combo box. Let's first place it right here. Alright, so this shall be a combo box that actually represents selecting gender. Then we're actually going to go inside it. Then we're going to add some items. So we're going to add 2 items to it. So the first item shall be male, and the item shall be female. Then click OK. Then we're going to duplicate this. Then we're going to have that actually represents the different classes. So we're going to start from grade 1. We're going to have grade 2. And then we're going to move on up to grade 12. So I won't do this very quickly, so just follow along. Alright, so there we have it up to grade 12 and click OK. So that shall give us options for that. Now we're going to insert a date edit. Drag that in also. There we go. So we now have a date edit. Alright, so next I'm going to make a copy of this piece of text here, the text full name, Ctrl C, Ctrl V. Then I'm going to change it. I'm going to change the details of the text. So now the first shall be select gender. So going to duplicate it until we have it 3 times. I'm going to call this date of birth. I'm going to call this select class. Alright, so now we're going to put this on top of that, and we're going to do some alignment. So we're going to align these vertically. Now we have them aligned vertically. Then we're also going to do the same thing here, align these vertically. Same thing here, align these vertically. Right, so now we're going to select these 3 vertical alignments right here, and then we're going to align everything horizontally. So there we go, that's looking much better. Now we're going to place these right here in the middle. Alright, so now let's just drag this down a little bit. Do the same thing here. And then lastly here. So now I want everything to be aligned vertically. So I'm going to select each one of the alignments. So I'm going to select this. Then I'm also going to select this vertical alignment and that vertical alignment. Then we're going to align everything vertically again. Alright, so that actually makes it neat. Then we're going to search for push buttons. So we're going to have 2 push buttons right here below. Ctrl C, Ctrl V. So the first push button shall have the words add student. Then this shall have the words cancel. So there we go. Now next, let's do some styling. So we're going to go to have the QDialog class at the top. Then we're going to, so first of all, type in QDialog, curly brackets. First thing first is we want to change the background color to white. Click apply. As you can see, the background color has actually changed to white. So next we're going to style the QLineEdits. Let's type in QLineEdit. Then first of all, we're going to work on the borders. They shall be 1 pixel in width, they shall all be solid, and they shall be gray. Let's click apply and see what happens. As you can see, that works for all the QLineEdits. Then we're going to work on their border radius. So type in border radius. We shall set that to 6 pixels. Click apply. As you can see, it has actually applied. Then we're going to set padding left, because we want each of the text to be actually aligned a little bit to the left, to the right by 15 pixels. Then click apply. Such shall actually work. Now we're going to set the height of each one of them. Let's try 35 pixels, so that each one is actually at a uniform height. So click apply. So I believe everything is now at 35 pixels. Now we're done with that. We're going to go to the QDateEdit. QDateEdit. Curly brackets. And inside here we're also going to set its border 1 pixel, solid, gray. Now as I've seen, most of these settings should actually be the same. So let's just copy these, place that right there. Oh, this was a mistake, so no semicolon there. So click apply. As you can see, it's actually working. Alright, so now something I need to do is I'm going to set its height. So I'm going to set its height to 31 pixels. Let's click apply, and it's working. Alright, now let's style the combo boxes. Combo box. So I'm going to copy these settings here, the first two, and I'm going to paste them, because we shall also be styling them. So first of all, we're going to have this set to 2 pixels. Then I shall make this white. Then we're going to set the border radius to 8 pixels. Click apply. And then I'm going to work on its padding in all directions. So I'm going to have 1 pixel by 18 pixel by 1 pixel by 3 pixel. Then click apply. Let's give it a background color. We shall set that to black. Then we're going to set the color of its text to white. Click apply. We're going to give it a height of 35 pixels for each of the combo boxes. So click apply. As you can see, it's working now. Next, let's set the padding left to 15 pixels. Click apply. We're going to give it a font weight, bold, and then we're going to give the selection background color to, I'm going to type in the coordinates 2980 B9. Then click apply. Alright, so now we're done with that. We can now click OK. Alright, so next we're going to change this text. So this shall be address. Click enter. This shall be phone number. click enter, and this shall be email, click enter. So now we're going to do some styling for these buttons here, so just click on this. So we're going to do some styling. So type in QPushButton. So first of all, background color shall be set to the coordinates 34D481 and click apply. So it's some form of green, as you can see right there. Then we're going to set the color of the text to white, click apply. We're going to set the border to none, click apply. Alright, so we're going to set the border radius. Type in border radius, we're going to set that to 8 pixels. And we're going to set the font white to bold. Let's click apply to see what's actually happening. There we go. Then we're now lastly going to set the font size to 15 pixels. Click apply. Then we're actually going to copy these same settings here. Click OK. Then we're going to paste the same settings to the style sheet of this button. So the difference should actually be the color. So the color here shall be 585858. Then click apply. So there we go. So now we're actually going to stretch these out a little bit. Now we're going to give them the same height. So I want to make sure the height is actually set to 41. Click enter. It's going to be the same thing here. The height should actually be set to 41. So same height. Let's stretch this out a little. And there we go. Now let's make sure this same height here is actually the same height here at the minimum for this button, and we're also going to do the same thing here. So the minimum height is also set to 41. Now once we've done that, we can select both, then click horizontal aligning. Then let's stretch this out. Then we're going to place this right below there, and there we go. Let's save this. Then we can view this form. Let's preview it. And as you can see, this is actually how everything shall look. So you can actually see our combo boxes and the data that shall actually be under them. So everything is actually working perfectly. So this shall be our dialog. Alright, so now we can actually rename the different items here. So we're going to call this, let's go to the front, name underscore line edit. So I'm going to have that same standard for most of these names. So I'm going to call this, so paste that. I'm going to call this address line edit. This shall be phone line edit. Then this shall be, definitely shall be called email line edit. Now I'm also going to give the names here. So this shall be the gender combo box. So go to the front, gender underscore combo box. That shall be an easy name to remember. And we're also going to give the same name here. So this shall be the class combo box. Then this shall be the date of birth date edit. So we're going to call it DOB underscore date edit to mean date of birth. Now this shall be called save student button. Save student underscore button. Then this is cancel button. Alright, so now we've done all the renaming. Now we can move to the front page here and make some changes. So remember that now we were in the dashboard page, so make sure to click in here and you can actually see the stacked widget here. So we're going to move to the page where we actually have the student information. So I believe that is actually page 3. So page 3 is where we're actually going to go. So the page that refers to student information, and inside that page is where we're going to be making changes. So first of all, we're going to move this information to the top. So student info shall actually be at the top right here. So now we're going to make some changes to it. Let's go to where we have the font family. Select this. Now we're going to change this to Poppins. Then look for semi-bold. So this is semi-bold right here. Make sure the font size is 20, then click OK. There we go. Duplicate it, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, and we're going to change this information to welcome to the students information page. Click enter. So we're going to make the same changes here. So this shall be Poppins regular, but then the font size shall be set to 10. Then click OK. Alright, so we shall just have this right below the statement students information. Now we're going to duplicate some of these items. So I'm going to duplicate this button here. It's Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. So I'm going to make use of it right here. Let's also copy this other button here, and we're going to paste it. So we're going to make some changes to these buttons, as you'll see. Then we should just need one copy of these. Then we're going to make a copy of this, select it, click Ctrl+V, make a copy of this also. Then we're going to paste it right here. As you can see, the stylings are actually no longer there, so we're actually going to copy the stylings here. So go to the style sheet. So go back to the students dialog here, then we're going to open it, then look for you have the styling for the combo boxes, then we're going to make a copy of them. So copy that, then we're going to paste the stylings here. Ctrl+V, click apply, okay. Then we're going to do the same thing here, then we're going to click OK. So now we have the stylings as we needed. So now I'm going to place this right here. Let's duplicate this. So I'm going to change the text here. This shall be export to Excel. And we're going to change this text to export to PDF. Alright, so we shall have these displayed at the top. Alright, so remember these actually have a maximum and a minimum size, so that is okay. So now we're going to select all of them, then we're going to set a horizontal alignment. And once we've done that, we can actually now stretch this out. Now we're going to change the colors here, so this shall actually be set to red. Let's go to have its style sheet, select background color, actually hover on it, then select background color here. Then we need to give it some form of red, not too much, just that. Then click apply. Then we're going to do the same thing here, but now we're going to give this a black color. So select this. So we're going to go to have the background colors, then we're going to select black, then click OK. So apply, and there we go. Then we're going to place these right below this. Then we're going to make a copy of this, search here, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. So we're going to place it right alongside these. Alright, so now next we're going to align these horizontally. So we've aligned them. So there we go, that's actually how I wanted it. So make sure this is selected. Then we're going to go to have hit side, then click 38 pixels. Then the maximum shall also be set to 38 pixels. And there we go, that's actually how I want it. Then we're going to go to have its placeholder, then we're going to make some changes. So change this to search student. Alright, that's going to be the purpose we shall be using it, to search for students. Alright, so now next we're going to insert a QTable. We're going to look for the table widget here. So select it, then place it right below this. Make sure it is within the stacked widget. Then we're going to stretch this out, but we're going to make sure the widget is actually set to a value of 950. Then click enter. Alright, so with this QTable selected, we're now going to go to edit its items. So we're going to add some items to it. So this shall be the column header names. So the first one shall be called name. Then you shall have student ID. Then we shall have gender. class birthday. Now let's add some more. So we shall have that for age, address, phone, email, and lastly we shall have that for actions. So the actions shall be where we shall have the buttons for updating and for deleting items in a row. So click OK, and there we go. Now next, let's style this. So go to its style sheet, then we're going to first style the header. So type in QHeaderView : section curly brackets. Now go and set the font weight at the top to bold. Then I'm going to set the background color to black and the color of the header text to white. Now let's click apply, and as you can see the changes have actually applied. Then click OK. I've actually seen there's an error in the items. It's actually, we don't need one of these items, so click OK. So there was no item called new column. Alright, so now next let's go back to styling. We're not yet done, so let's work on the QTableWidget curly brackets. Now in arrows we want to have an alternate color, alternate background color. We shall set its coordinates to B0 ED FB. Then click apply. Then we shall also set the background color to the coordinates hash F4 F9 FA. Then click apply. Then you can click OK. And one more thing, with this still selected, we're going to scroll down, then look for alternating row colors. So make sure this is checked. So that's going to be very, very important. Now next, I can actually that this text is still now this is still too big. Let's actually reduce this. We're going to set each one of these to font size 12. Click OK. Do the same thing here. This shall be set font size 12. OK. And we're going to do the same thing here. Then click OK. Now we need to insert some icons. Alright, so now let me show you something. I have a folder on my desktop called new icons, and these are different icons that I actually want to add to the list of icons that we already have in our resources. So I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of them. So click copy. I'm going to go to the desktop here, then go to where we have schools, and inside the icons folder I'm going to paste them in. So that means we now actually have new icons to our list. So whenever we do that, we actually have to update our icons list. So go to where we have our icons, click on the pen tool, then make sure to select this, click on this, then go back in, and then we're going to select all and click open. Now when we do that, we now have an updated list of icons. Then click OK. So now we can actually access these new items that we've actually added. So now where we have add student, we're going to go to where we have its icon. They're going to choose resource. They're going to have that for adding student. Click OK. They're going to have an icon for Excel. For Excel, click choose resource. Then here is the Excel PNG. Then we're going to look for it for the PDFs. Choose resource, and there we go. We select that, and now we actually have everything looking right. Now next thing we shall do is we shall actually rename our buttons. We shall call this, change it from save student to add student button. This shall be called Excel export underscore button. Then we shall call this PDF export underscore button. So I'm going to call this select gender. We shall call this select underscore class, and we shall call this search student. Then now this table, which is going to be the table we shall be using, we shall call it student info underscore table. Alright, so I may have forgotten to do something, so go back to here where we have the combo box, and then we're going to add something at the top. So click add. We're going to add the words select. Let's actually change this to male. Then we're going to change this text at the top to select. Make sure it's actually in capital letters. Select gender. Then click OK. Then we're going to do the same thing here. Make sure it's selected. Then we're going to add item at the very top. Let's click plus. Then change this second text to grade 2. Alright, and then we're going to go to the top, and then here we're going to change it to select class. Now we're going to make sure every letter is capital. Now I've actually noticed there's an error here. Let's change that from grace to grade. So that's just a spelling error. Alright, so now we can click OK. Everything is okay. Now we can actually now see we need to stretch these out a little bit. Let's increase the width here. We're going to change it to 150. Alright, so that's perfect. We're going to do the same thing for the one of select gender, so that you can actually see all the text. So set this to 150 also, and I believe that's okay. Now I've noticed in my table I'm actually missing the column phone, so we're going to add it after address. Click plus and then type in phone. Alright, then click OK. So now I believe every mistake has actually been cleared out, and everything should actually now work fine. Alright, so now we're going to finally save our project. So click save. Then we're going to scroll below, and we're also going to save this dialog also. So click save. And now that we're done with here, we can now go to Visual Studio Code to continue with the remaining part of the project. Alright, so with our project open in Visual Studio Code, as you can see, we have our new files here. Now we're going to delete the old resources file that we'd actually initially created, and that's because we've actually updated our resources file, so that needs to be deleted. We're going to convert it afresh. And also going to delete this UI index file, since we've also made changes to the new file. So we're just going to do that from scratch. So we're going to open the terminal once again. So here's the terminal, and then inside here we're going to type in PySide6 Qt. Type in index.ui. Then we're going to convert that to the file ui_index.py. Then click enter. Then it should convert that afresh. So we have a new ui index.py file. Now we're going to do the same thing for the resources file. So type in PySide6-rcc, then type in resources.qrc -o, then resources_rc.py. Now it should convert this again. Alright, so now we have a new resources file with all the different updates we've actually made. So as you can see, it's actually looking good. Alright, so once we're done with that, now we also need to make sure we convert the student dialog.ui file that we had actually created. So remember the dialog, so we're going to also convert it. So go down here. Alright, so that's it. So we're going to go down here, type PySide6-uic, then type in student dialog.ui student dialog.py, then click enter. Then now we also have it converted right there. So now we have the file that we actually were looking for. Alright, so now we're going to change the different encodings of the new files we've created. So save this encoding of the UI index file to UTF-8. Then we're going to do the same thing for the student dialog. We're also going to save its encoding to UTF-8. So remember, if you don't do this while loading, you may actually experience some errors. So that is very, very important to do at this stage. Alright, so in this next step, we're going to go to the student dialog and we're going to make some changes. So first of all, we're going to change it into a Q dialog. So right here at the top where you actually see the word object, we're going to make some changes. So change this text to Q dialog. Then we're going to delete all this text right here. So all this won't be necessary. So we're just going to replace it with something new. So we're going to write a different text. So type in init, then self, parent, none. Then we're going to type in super dot init and type in parent. Now that is what we're going to have done. Now we're going to change everywhere you see a yellow, we're going to change that text to self. So I'm going to do that very quickly for each piece. Wherever I see yellow, change that to self. Alright, so wherever you see student dialog in yellow, just change that to self. So I'm doing that very quickly. Scroll down, do the same thing here. Then lastly, do the same thing here. Alright, so there we go. We're now done. Now change the title. We're going to change the title of the window to students dialog. Alright, now that we're done with that, we can now go and drag the front page. This is where we're going to be doing most of the coding. Now we're going to first install MySQL connector to connect to MySQL database. So go to where you have your Anaconda prompt, and then we're going to install MySQL connector. Now I already have mine installed, but if you don't, you can type in these words: pip install MySQL connector or So that's what you would do. Alright, so now I'm going to switch on my XAMPP here. Make sure you've installed yours so far. So click start. Let's actually make sure it is turned on. Alright, so it's still switching on. So I'm waiting for MySQL to switch on. Alright, so now I believe it's now running. It's now running properly. Alright, so now that we're done with that, we can now click on admin here. Then we can actually see the PHP my admin menu. So it's actually working. That's why you can actually see this menu. So that's where our databases shall be. So now let's close this and then let's return to our project. Alright, so first of all, we're going to import MySQL.connector. Then now we can scroll to the very bottom of this file. Then under here, we're going to create a new method. Under the handle menu items, we're going to create a new method. So this method shall help us to create the database connection. So create database connection. So def, we're going to call the method create connection, then self. Alright, so now inside here, we're now going to work on the methodology. So we're going to replace these with, so we're going to replace those with your details, the details of your SQL server as you have them. So we're going to have a variable to represent the host name. So my host name is localhost. So it depends on what you have. My username shall be root. Then I shall have no password. So my password shall be blank. And then my database name, I'm actually going to create a database called MySQL. So it's going to be my database name. Alright, so now we're going to establish a connection to MySQL server. Alright, so now type in self.mydb shall be equal to mysql.connect, mysql connector.connect. Then inside these brackets, we're going to type in the host shall be equal to host name as we've given it right there. Then we're going to duplicate this. So we're going to have different items. So we're going to have username or user shall be equal to, so user shall be equal to the username. Then password shall be equal to my password. So it shall be equal to the value that you actually have there at the top. Alright, so now next we're going to create a cursor to execute SQL queries. So we're going to need to execute SQL queries. So cursor shall be equal to self.mydb.cursor, and then we're going to create the database if it doesn't exist. So now we're going to assume it doesn't exist. So now I want everything to be done from this side so that I won't have to go and manually create a database. So cursor.execute, so we're going to create database if not exists. Alright, so now the database name shall be important. We shall have that database name. So the database shall be MySQL, as we've actually given it there. So you actually just need to show the variable. So we're going to connect to the created database. So once the database is created, we need to connect to it. So this is how we're going to connect to it. So now just add the database right here. So database shall be equal to, so it shall actually be equal to the database name, the value that would actually given it. Alright, so now we're going to return self.myDatabase, mydb. Alright, so now we're done with this part. Alright, so now that we're done with this, we shall go to the top and we need to now make a call to this method so that the database is created every single time we actually run our project. So go down here under where we had actually imported, put the context menu buttons. So going to connect to MySQL server and create the database if it doesn't exist. So we're going to do that automatically. So right here at the top, we're just going to make a call to that method. So type in self.createConnection. It's going to happen every single time that the project is run. So now we're going to run our project and we shall see if the database will actually be created automatically. So run the Python file. So just wait for it to load. Alright, so now it has loaded, let's actually check. Alright, so now inside here we can now go to students info page and actually you can actually see it being displayed right here. But now let's actually find out if the database has been created. So we're now going to go back to Google Chrome. Then as you can see, let's reload. We can actually see that the database MySQL has actually been created already. Though it has no tables, don't worry about that. That shall be the next step. Alright, so now our database is created automatically. And now we need to work on the methods that shall actually enable us to create the tables within the database. Alright, so now next we need to make sure tables are created. So we're going to create students table right now. So now we have a method, we shall call it create students table self. Alright, so now inside here we're going to create a cursor for executing SQL queries. So shall be the first one. So this is how we shall create it. So cursor shall be equal to self.createConnection brackets dot cursor. Alright, so now next we're going to create the query. So here is the query. So now we first create the, actually we need to first write out the variable. The variable shall be create students table query. Alright, then inside here is where we're going to write the, so we're going to write create table if not exists. So this is very important. So we only create it if the table doesn't exist. So students table. Then we're going to insert the column names. The first one is names, which shall be of type text. Then student ID, which shall be of type variable character with length of 15 characters. Then this shall be the primary key. Then we're going to have gender. We're going to have that have variable text data type. Class is text, and then birthday is also text. Then next we're going to have age. And then we have address, phone number, variable character, 15 characters. Then we're going to have email, which is also variable character. Alright, so there we go. We're done with that. Now we can now execute this. So we're going to execute that create students query. Alright, so now next we need to commit these changes and close the connection. So that's very important. So self.mydb.commit. Then type in self.mydb.close. Now I think I've made some mistake. That's why the cursor.execute is not in yellow. I actually forgot to put brackets here. So that's very important. Now it's in yellow. So that's something you have to do every single time. Alright, so now we can scroll back to the top. Then right under here where we actually had created the connection, we're now going to also make a call to that method. So create students table. Alright, so now here we're going to type self dot create students table brackets. Alright, so as simple as that. And now we can actually go and run our Python project to make sure that it actually works. So now go back to main and run it again. So once it opens, we can now go to the exam side and actually see if the table is created. And as you can see, the students table has just been created. Alright, so when I click on this, you can actually see the different column names, name, student ID, gender, age, and the rest. And then when I click on the structure, you can actually see the different data types of each column. So it's actually working perfectly. And that's going to happen every single time we run a project. It will create a table if it doesn't exist, and to also create a database if it doesn't exist. So in this next step, we'll go to the student dialog, and then we're going to go to the very top of it. Then under this, we're going to import MySQL.connector, because we're also going to need to access the MySQL database from here. Then we can actually scroll below here. Now we're going to make a copy, go to the front page, and then we're going to look for where we actually created the database connection. Then we're going to copy this whole method as it is. So just copy every bit of it. So click Ctrl+C, then go back to the student dialog and just paste. Now let's align this comment. Alright, so once that's aligned, we can now scroll below it, and we shall now create a new method. So now this new method shall be for for inserting a new student into the database table, the table called students table. So insert new student. Then now under here is where we're going to create the method for inserting a new student. So insert new student self, and then let's close that with a colon. Now inside here we need to make sure there's error management, so type in try. Then inside here we're now going to also create the cursor, then connect it to the, so create action.cursor. Alright, so now create the gender variable that actually picks from the combo box. Remember, the combo box was actually called gender combo box, so it's going to pick the current index or the current text from it. So we're going to store that in a variable. This shall be very important whenever we generate the student ID. So we're going to be making use of the gender, because those of male shall be different from those of female. So now we're going to also have a variable called student ID. Then now this student ID shall actually be calling a method that shall actually be generating the student ID. Then we shall give it the argument gender. The variable gender shall be its argument. So now let's create that method below. Alright, so now we're going to make a copy. So copy that, generate student ID. Then we're going to, so to always have require the variable of gender to be given to it. Now inside here we're going to create the cursor again, and then we're going to make sure that while it is true, so while it is actually running, so every time if gender is equal to male, but the first start value, so at the beginning of the student ID, it will start with 24/U/M. So whenever it's a male, else or otherwise, if the gender is different, which means they are female, this shall actually be UF. So those shall be the first beginning parts of the ID. And now we're going to generate a random value after that. So now we're going to have a method to generate a random number that we shall actually put at the end of those start values. Now the student ID at the end shall be the ID start value plus that random value that we shall actually generate. So now we're going to need to create another method to actually generate that random number. Alright, so now next we're going to work on method for generating the random number. So we're going to call it generate random number. Then inside here type in self. Now we're going to need to make some import, so we're going to scroll to the very top, then we're going to make some import right under here. So from random we shall import rand int. Now we're going to scroll back down, and then here we're going to now work on it. Alright, so now the number shall be equal to rand int, then the value shall be a value between 1 and 1000. But now we shall allow for values that actually start from 0001. So that's how we're going to arrange everything. So we're going to accept values that actually have beginning values that actually also have zeros at the very beginning. So that's how we're going to state it. So the number that we shall actually generate can now also have values from 001 onwards. So that shall actually allow us to have more. So we're going to return the random number. Then we can now go back here and we can finish the method. Alright, so now whenever an ID is generated, we need to check if that ID is already existent in the database, because we want to make sure that each ID is unique and should not be repeated, because an ID is the primary key. So now this is how we're going to check it. So now we're going to actually run a query. So inside here we're going to run a query. So we're going to select the student ID from the table, from the column students, from students table, where an ID is similar to the ID that we've actually just generated. Alright, so now inside here we're actually going to insert the ID that we've actually just generated. Then now we're going to need to check if that ID is already existent. So let's see, existing ID is equal to the value that we shall actually fetch. So if it is actually true, we would actually fetch a value. So now if not existing ID, so that actually means if now there is no existing ID, that means we can now run and return the student ID. Otherwise it will actually just run in a loop and generate another ID. So now we can actually go back to the insert new student method, and actually we can continue from where we stopped. Alright, so now we need to find a way of creating birthday and age, but now let's first find a way of generating the birthday of the student based on the date that was actually given. So it actually needs to be converted into ISO date format for it to be easily interpreted. So now we're going to create a method which shall actually give us the birthday. So we shall call the method self.handleDateChange. So we're going to change that date into a format that we can actually easily read and convert. So now we're going to create the method. So the method shall be handleDateChange. So this shall help us convert the date value that we've actually created. So now we're going to convert the QDate to a string in the format. So it's the format YYY dot month and day, as you can see right there. So now we're going to need to make some import. So we're going to import, so type in from date time, we're going to import date time. Alright, so now we've done that import, we can now go back down to where we have the handleDateChange, and then we shall continue. Alright, so first of all we need to actually select the date we've actually created from the variable date. So now selected date shall be, so type in self.dob. So from the DateEdit we shall pick out that date. Then now we're going to create the date string. So the date string variable shall be equal to the selected date. Then we're going to convert it to string as QTISO date. Then we can return that date string that we've actually generated, and that shall actually be equal to our birthday. So next we need to work on the logic for creating the age. So that's going to be very, very important. So we're going to use that DateEdit to actually calculate the birthday. So we're going to create a new variable, we shall call it birthdate, which shall be equal to self.dob. So we're going to get the date value from that DateEdit. So we're going to assign it to birthdate. Then age shall be equal to, so we're going to create another method which shall be calculate age, which shall actually calculate first the age based on that birth date. So now we're going to make a copy of this calculate age, then we're going to scroll down and we're going to create a new method. So this method shall actually help us to calculate the exact birthday based on that birth date. So now type in, inside here type in self, and then that birth date shall be the argument whenever we actually call that method. So we're going to first get the current date. Such shall actually be very, very important. So the current date shall be equal to date time dot now dot date. Such shall actually give us the value of the current date. So next we're going to have to create a date object for the birth date. So now let's create that date object. So now we're going to call it birth date time, which shall be equal to date time. Then inside there we're going to have birth date. We're going to pick out the year. So we're going to have the year, then make a duplicate of this. So we're going to duplicate it 3 times. So we're going to have to pick out the month. So the month shall be very, very important. Then we're going to have the day. So every calculation shall be made based on those specific details. Then type in dot date. Then now next we're going to calculate the difference in year. So now assuming someone was born on 1st January, so the age should actually be simple. It shall just be the current date year, the year of the current date minus the birth date year. So that would actually be straightforward. Oh, actually let's correct this. This should actually supposed to be birth date time dot year. So now in case someone is born on 1st January, it's straightforward. Now otherwise, if someone is born on a day later than 1st January, their birthday may be different. So we're going to check if the birthday has occurred this year already. So that's another way of saying that it actually occurs on a day later than January. So now let's actually check for such. So now if current date month, if the month, then we're going to pick out the day. So now these are the comparisons we're going to make. So if that is less than the birth date month and then birth date day, as you can see here, so in that case we're actually going to subtract the age by 1. Then we're going to return the value of age. Now this should actually calculate the accurate value of age based on the values we get on the date edit. So now we shall be sure that the variable here shall actually be accurate for the value of age when we actually give it the birth date as an argument. Alright, so now we need to create a list to actually hold all the student information for this new student. So we're going to call it self.newStudent. That shall be the name of our list. Inside our list, we're going to list the items actually the way they were ordered in the table. So we're going to first give it the name line edit. So we're going to give it the text in the name line edit. So that's going to be where we place the name. Then we're also going to give it the student ID. Then give it the student gender. So we're going to get the current text in the student gender combo box. Then we're also going to give it the current text in the class combo box. The next, we're also going to need to give it the birthday. So the birthday shall be given to it. Then we shall also put in the age, the address. So the address shall be the value in the address line edit. So that text that is there. Then we're also going to need to get the text on the phone line edit. So actually let's put a comma there. So we shall need also that value on the phone line edit. So we need that text. So also going to need that on the email. So I believe this shall be the last one that we actually need. So now that we've done that, we can now insert multiple rows. So we can now insert into the SQL database. So now we're going to insert. So let's create the query. So query shall actually be, so this is why we need to be careful. So type in insert into students table. So that's the name of the table. So now we write the column names. So we shall have names, student ID, gender, class, birthday, age, address, then phone, number, then email. So that's how the columns are written in the database. So now be careful in that case. So now we're going to type in the values. So in the values part, we're just going to put percentage %s, the number of times of the number of columns that we actually have in this case. Percentage %s until the number is actually right. Then we can actually now close that. Now next, we're now going to type in cursor.execute. So we're going to now execute this query. So place it inside there, and then right beside that we're going to have to put the students list. So that's actually very, very important in this case. Now next, we need to commit this data into the database. So mydb.commit, and then type in mydb.close. Alright, so now I want to show a message every single time data is actually inserted successfully. So I want a message box. So we're going to create a method that actually generates a message box to show success every single time that data has actually been inserted successfully into the students table. So we're going to show inserted message. So type in self, and then inside here we're actually going to make an instance of the message box. So Q message box. Then now we need to import it. So now we're going to scroll to the very top, look for where we actually have the PySide6 Qt widgets. Then we're going to import Q message box. Then we can now go back down then we can now finish it. Alright, so now message box, we need to actually set a Windows title for it. So set Windows title. The title shall simply be success. Then next we're now going to also set the text. So now the text inside, we're going to set the NameLineEdit text. So I'm going to get the text from the name, and then I'm going to type name inserted into the database depending on the name that is actually given at that exact moment. Then next we need to execute it. So once we're done with that, we can now go back to the top. So go back and continue from where we stopped. So now we're going to insert the message. Immediately after we execute this query, we're going to show that message. So that shall actually be a sign that everything has actually happened successfully. So inside here, we're going to type in self.show inserted message. And once we're done with that, we shall now work on the exception. So now let's finish the exception. So now in case there is an error, the error shall actually show inside the exception. So we're going to handle MySQL errors here. So we're going to print the error depending on what error it is right below that. And I believe that now this method is complete. Alright, so now next we need to find a way of actually sending a signal to the front page to actually show that actually here we've actually clicked on the save student button, and now it is okay to actually insert the student into the database and actually display them on the front page. So we need to have a way of transmitting the signal. So that's why we're going to have a method called add student. Now inside here, this method shall actually make a call to the method self.insert new student. Such shall actually be very important in this case. Now inside here, we're also going to type in something else. So it's going to be self.accept. So now that shall actually be a signal that shall actually be sent every single time that we actually click on the button save or add student. We shall actually see how we shall actually make a reference to that accepted from the front page side when we get to the front page side. So now inside here, we now need to add new student or pupil when you actually press a button. So actually we're going to make a call to that. Such shall actually be very important. So now type in self. So now we're going to make a reference to the buttons. Remember this button for saving student, we actually call it self student button. So when it's actually clicked, we should actually make a connection to this method we just created called self.add student. Now this is very important because we actually have this as an external file that is actually different from the front page file. Since we're using a dialog, that's why we need to work with this logic. So now we're going to also give something. So when you click on the cancel button, definitely this dialog has to close. That's why we actually write this as you see. Now you can go back to the front page. So the next step is we're going to work on the logic for actually opening the student dialog. So we're going to scroll to the bottom right below here, then we're going to work on that method. So open dialog for inserting new student. So now the method shall be called open add student dialog. So type in self colon, and then now here we're going to make some import. So we're going to import the student dialog file. Then we're going to import its main class. So remember, its main class is actually called, go to the top, it's called UI student dialog. So make a copy of that. That's what we're going to import, and then paste that. Alright, so now here we're now going to instantiate and show the dialog. So now we're going to make an instance of that main class. So add student dialog is the variable we've actually created. It shall be an instance of UI student's dialog. Alright, and then now we're going to create a variable called results. So this is a variable that shall actually hold until the user clicks on add or save student. So it shall actually hold the execution. So this will block until the dialog is closed. So now remember that what we had actually created on that side, where a user actually has to accept before something actually happens on this front page. So now this shall actually block that until there is actually a change, or until that button is actually clicked. So now let's actually just leave this as an empty one but we shall actually come back to it. So if the dialog was accepted or user clicked add student button, something shall actually happen right here. But for now we shall actually just leave it empty. That's why we're going to just type in the word pass. So we should just come back to it later on. Alright, so now we can scroll to the very top. Actually, let's scroll down a little bit. Then I believe under this we can now actually make a call to that method to actually open the student dialog. So now open add student dialog. So now we shall actually open it by actually clicking. So remember the button that we actually called add student button. So when it's actually click, we shall actually connect to that method for adding the student dialog. So now click on it, make sure it's set to open. And then when I actually click open the Python file, I can now go back to the students info page, and then something should happen when I click on this add student. You can actually see that the dialog actually just pops open. Then here it is, just as we wanted. So I believe every part is actually looking good. So let's click on it again, it actually opens again. So now let's try to type in something. Let's try to insert a student. Let's put in my name, Emmanuel Olega. Then let's choose, my gender is male. Let's actually go with grade 1. And then let's write my actual birthday. Then let's change my address to Kampala. Phone number, let's put in some random number. This is not my exact phone number. And then let's use my email, my public email, emmaconnect2022@gmail.com. So let's see actually how this works. So when I click add student, or actually experience an error, I see a weekly reference object no longer exists. So why is that? So I believe there is an error with the way I actually created my cursor inside my student dialog. Okay, so this is actually a major error and I need to correct that. So we're going to go back to where we actually have to insert new student. Let's actually change the way this is actually created. So now we need to find a way of actually detecting if the connection is actually still on. So that's, I think, where the error is. So now here is how we're going to correct it. So now we're going to type connection shall be equal to self.createConnection, and then now we're going to find a way of checking if the connection is none. Then we're going to make a return. Then actually let's change this. So this shall be self.connection. Actually it should just be connection.cursor. Then let's change this. So this shall be connection.commit. Then this shall be changed to cursor.close. Then lastly, we're going to need to add the, so we're going to also need to close the connection. So connection.close. I believe that now it should actually work correctly. Let's actually go back. Let's run the Python file again. And then now I believe that when we actually create it, it should actually insert into the database. Let's actually open this. Then let's type my name again, Emmanuel Olega. Then let's actually put me as grade 12. Let's save the birthday as 1st January 2000. So address Kampala again. Phone number, I'm also going to type in something random. This is not accurate, just know that. Then let's type in a random email, emma@yahoo.com. You know what? Why not? Let's click add student. Now you can see it says Emmanuel Olega inserted into the database. So it's actually successful now in this case. So it's actually working. Now let's check phpMyAdmin to see. Let's check the table. Let's refresh this. So once it's refreshed, we should actually see the name in the database. And as you can see, my information is in the database. You can actually see the student ID has also been generated accurately. So it's male and grade 12, the birthday is there, the age calculated properly, the address, the phone number, the email. So now everything is actually working accurately. So now next, I'll just need to work on the logic of how to load that student data into the database table that you can see right there. So now let's go down and let's work on that logic. So now let's create the method. So now this method shall be used to load student information to Qtable. So now we shall call the method load students info. Then inside the brackets we shall put in the word self. Then now we shall put in the colons. And now we can first create an empty one. Now let's create the second method. So you should have the method that actually loads the information. Then you need to have one that actually gets information from the database. So that's going to be very, very important. So all these are different and they shall be working together. And that's because we shall have our combo boxes that actually sort the data that is actually in the QTable. But you'll get it. So now let's clear the existing data in the table. So every single time we load students info to the table, we shall need to first clear. So we're going to type in self student info table set row count to 0. So that's how you actually clear it. So it's going to be the first step. And then now we're going to need to fetch data based on the selected class and gender. So this shall actually allow us to actually sort them. So this shall be important. So now selected class variable shall be equal to the value from selected class. So we're going to select the current text from the combo box select class, and then we're going to create a variable that actually also holds the current text from the combo box select gender. So this actually holds that current text. The next, the data shall be equal to the value that we actually get from the get data from table method. Then we shall actually give it arguments selected class and selected gender. Alright, so now we're going to now put in the arguments. So class filter and gender filter. So this shall be used to filter. So we shall filter what we actually have in the table. So now let's create the cursor. Shall be equal to create connection dot cursor. Alright. Now we shall now construct the SQL query based on the selected filters. So query shall be equal to select names, student ID, so these are the names of the columns, gender, class, birthday, age, address, phone number, email, from students table, where. Alright, so now we need to choose where. So we need to actually work on how it's sorted. So now we're going to type in the class filter, so the value that we actually get from the class current text. So our class filter is equal to select class. So if it's in select class, or it is equal to the variable of the current text. So now whatever is actually available on the current text in the combo box. So that shall be very, very key. Actually, we need to put these inside quotes. So class filter. So now when that combo box is either to select class or it actually has the value of the current text, so that means whether it's actually a male or female, whatever the grade is at that exact point. Now also going to need to set that for the gender filter. So now when you have select class, it means all will be displayed, and then when you have the specific item selected, it will now sort to that item. So now we have that for gender also. Now next we're going to now execute the query. Cursor.execute query, and then data shall be equal to cursor.fetch all. And lastly, we're going to return the data that we actually get from this method. Now inside here, we now need to actually put the data into the Q table. So we're going to populate the table with the filtered data. Alright, so now let's write a for loop for row index, comma, row data in enumerate. Then we're going to enumerate through that data that we've actually gotten from the table, self.studentinfo table dot insert row index, for to have another loop for column index, cell data in enumerate, also type in the row data, item is equal to QTableWidget item, then convert that data into a string. Alright, so now here we need to import QTableWidget item. So that's very, very important. It's an important import. And then self.studentInfoTable set item row index, comma, column index, comma, item. Then now we need to create a custom widget with 2 buttons. So we need to have 2 buttons in the actions column. So this shall be very, very important for the action. So this shall actually be lined up horizontally. So 2 buttons. So now we shall actually create a variable double button widget which shall be equal to, so now I'm going to make a reference to a class we shall create double button widget students. Then we shall actually give it, we shall pass to it the arguments row index and row data. Alright, so now down here we're actually going to create that new class. Alright, so now we're going to create double class. So it's the double button class. That's going to be important. So type in class, then we're going to make a copy of this. So this is what we're going to be using. It's going to be double button widget students. Then I'll clear this up, and then this is the Q widget. It's going to actually be a subclass of the Q widget class. Then type in init self. So we need to make a call to those values we'd actually passed in as arguments, row index and row data. Then type in super dot underscore init. And then now we can now store the row index and row data as an instance in variables. Alright, so now self.rowIndex shall be equal to row index, and then self row data shall be equal to row data. Now row data is actually a tuple which actually contains all the items that are in the different rows, so we can access each row. So now we're going to get student variables from the tuple. So we're going to get from the tuple row data. So student name shall actually be the first item, so it shall be self.row, then the first item shall be item 0. Then we're also going to get the student ID, which shall actually be item 1, which is the second item. And then now we're going to create a layout of how those buttons look. So we're going to have a Q horizontal layout. Then type in self, then go to the top, and we're going to make sure we import Q horizontal, Q widget, and then make sure to also import Q hbox layout. We can also import QVbox layout. Now go back down. Now let's continue with the layout. Then now we need to create blue. So we're going to make sure the edit button is actually blue in color. So self.edit button shall be equal to QPushButton. So we're going to have a QPushButton. We're going to leave it blank, but we're going to insert an icon, as we shall see later on. So make sure to just leave it blank. Then go to the top and make sure to import QPushButton also. Now we're going to continue, and then self.editButtons.set style sheet. So we need to set its color. So the background color shall be blue. Then we're continuing self.edit button dot. Now we're going to set the fixed size, so we're going to have it to have a fixed size. So this shall be the dimensions of it. So make sure that these sizes are fixed. And then now we're also going to create the delete button, so it's going to be red in color. So change this to delete, change this to delete, then change this also to delete. Now we're going to also change the color. The background color shall be red. Then the dimensions, the fixed size shall actually be the same as that of the edit button. Alright, so now down here we need to now set the icons for the buttons. Alright, so now we need to set the icons. So now icon shall be equal to QIcon. Alright, so now we need to make sure to actually import this. So go back to the top where you have QTGUI, then import QIcon. Alright, so first of all, we're going to make a reference to the edit button icon. So remember, it's in the icons folder. Then we called it edit.png. Alright, then type in self.edit button dot set icon. And we're going to set this icon that we've actually created here. So now we're going to duplicate this and do the same thing for delete button, but this shall be icon 2. Change this to delete.png. Then this shall also be set to delete button. Alright, so now we can now set both of these buttons to the horizontal layout. So layout.addWidget, so we're adding the edit button, then also going to add the next we're going to add the delete button. So that shall be the order they shall actually be displayed: edit button first, then delete button next, both to the horizontal layout. Alright, so now once we're done with that, we can now scroll back to where we actually have it here, back to the load student info class. And then now we're going to set this custom widget with 2 buttons. So we're going to set the actions as the cell for the actions column. So actions column index is actually 9, so that's something important to note. I think that's column 10, so that's why it's called 9. Self.student.info table.set cell widget row index 9. Then we're going to set the double button widget inside there. Now we need to set the row heights. Make sure that we have more row height, because these buttons are actually really much bigger than the usual row heights. So that's very, very important. So we're going to set this to 50. Alright, so that we have more space on the row height. Alright, so now we're going to scroll to the top. Alright, so just right under here, under create students, we're actually going to now load students information to QTable. So this is how we're going to actually load them. So now we're going to just call the method self.load student info. Then now we also need to find a way of loading whenever we actually make some changes to the combo boxes for selecting class and for selecting gender. So now when we have that combo box of select class, when it is actually changed, so any changes made, it will also supposed to load the student info page. So this is more like reloading it every single time we actually also make changes, so that it actually matches what is actually on the combo boxes. So let's run this and see. Then when I go to student information, you can actually see that it has actually loaded, but now not everything fits on the page. I don't even see the Q actions. Let's actually go back to front page here, and let's actually work on that. So now there is an error there. I need to now make sure I control the different widths of the different columns of the table and make sure that they actually fit properly. So that's what I'm going to do this time. So I'm going to control column widths. Let's spell widths properly. And then now I'm going to work on each one. So self.student.info table, so set column width. So I'm going to start from the very first one. So first column shall have a width of 150. Make a duplicate of that. Then now just make quick changes for each column. So from the first column to the 10th column. So the last column, column 10, actually has an index of 9. So now let's edit the values. Make sure to set the values just as I'm doing it here, because I actually have done approximation of the size that we should actually need. Actually, let's change this to 70 and that to 120. Alright, so now I believe everything should fit. So let's run this again. And as you can see, everything now fits perfectly. So let's even try to add a new student. Let's add a student, Sarah Smith. Let's see how this will be displayed. And then now this is a lady, so she's going to be female. So let's set this to female. Then let's give her grade 7. Let's also work on her birthday. So she's born in 2005. Let's set the month, June 20th. So 20th June 2005. Then the address is going to be Charlotte. Then I want to just forge some random phone number because I don't know the exact phone number. Then set the email, sarah@gmail.com. Then let's add student. As you can see, she has actually successfully been added, but I don't see her on the table. So what happens? I want to make sure that now this table reloads or refreshes every single time a new student is added. So that's why we're going to go back to the open add student dialog, and now we're going to work on what happens every single time a new student is added. So it needs to refresh in that case. So create a method reload students table data, type self, and then now inside here this method is called to reload the table data. So it's going to load that table again, self.load students info. Then now we're going to actually make a call to it from inside here. So this is how we actually make refreshing in this case. Now I've actually seen I've made some error here. Actually, I believe it's in the accepted statement. It's actually supposed to be capital A, not small a. So make sure to correct that, otherwise it may not work. Now you can scroll back to the top to where we actually have our the call to reload students information to the table. So here we're actually going to make those changes. So now this actually needs to be changed to reload students table data, and then the same thing here, this also needs to be changed to reload students table data. Now let's try to run this again. Run the Python file, open student information. Now here we have our two students, Sarah Smith and Emmanuel, and as you can see we can now sort them. So this actually works correctly, so we can sort them by gender. Let's add another student to actually spice this up better. Let's add the student Umara Daniel. So he's male, grade 3. Let's put his birthday. Let's change this to 2010. Then we're going to change the month to October, 8th October. So 10th October. So now we're going to have him as being from Makerere. Then this is a random phone number. It's not his real phone number anyway. Then we're going to set his email. His email shall be daniel@omara@yahoo.com. Let's click add student. So he's inserted. Click OK. And let's try to sort by gender. And as you can see, we only have the male students, and then the female student, Sarah Smith. Then now let's sort by class. So we have no student that is female and in grade 4, grade 2. Let's put this back, and as you can see, it actually works accurately as you want. So you can actually sort in any way. So everything shall just simply match with what we actually have on the combo boxes. So it's actually accurately working. Let's try grade 4. There is no male in grade 4. There is now a male in grade 3. And let's go back to the default. Alright, so now let's add another student to spice this up even better. Let's add another lady. I'm going to call her Amaro Vera. Let's change this to capital V so that everything looks uniform. Female, grade 1, then born in 2012. Let's change the month to, actually it's, alright, so 28th December 2012. Then she's from Wakiso. Let's put in a random phone number, just some random 10 digits. Then vera@gmail.com. Let's click add student, and as you can see, she should just be loaded in directly. So it's actually working. correctly. And then you can actually see her age is calculated properly, so she's 11. Now next, let's work on the search logic so that you can actually be able to search for a student from our table. Alright, so in the front page, we're just going to scroll down. This just before we get to the double button class, we're going to create another method for searching for the student. So we're going to call it search students, type in self, and then here we're going to work on the inner logic. So first of all, we need to clear previous table results, so that's going to be very important. So self.studentInfo table, then set row count to 0. So that's step 1. Then next we need to get the search query from the QLineEdit. So now search query shall be equal to self dot, so I'd actually call it search student, so there's a spelling error in the object name, but don't worry about that, just make sure that it's actually the exact object name. So cursor shall be equal to self dot create connection dot cursor. Then now next we're going to now we need to create the query. So the SQL query shall be, so we're going to actually copy what we have here to actually save time. Let's copy and make changes. So delete this, then we're going to change this, so it just needs to be where names like, then inside here we're going to have values inside 2 percentage signs. Then here we're going to insert this variable search query, which represents the value in the line edit. Alright, so now it should work. So now cursor, we're going to execute it. Cursor, execute this SQL query. So the results we shall get shall be equal to that. So now fetch all, and then we give it the variable results. Alright, so now we're going to copy all this logic here. So everything here is the same. So we're going to populate data the exact same way whenever we search for a student and we find one. So the table is populated in the exact same way. It's just that where there is data here, we're going to need to change that and actually put results. So that's actually the main difference here. So this just changes to results. And as I've said before, there was actually an error in the object name here, search student. So that was actually an error I think I made while in Qt Designer. Now let's see where that error is. So when I actually select this, you can actually see I'd actually spelled it as search student. It's supposed to be search student, but because the name is actually the same, it will still work. So I'm going to scroll back. Yeah, so right under here, so under these load student information table, we're going to add that for searching. So this is where we're going to put that logic. So now we're going to first have to make a reference to that line edit. So self dot, remember we called it search student dot. Now we need to view for text change. So in case of any change in text, it's going to connect to this method. So self dot search students. So remember it's search students. So now go back to the main and then let's run this again. Run Python file. So remember we're now going to search by name of the student. So now type in any name. Now let's type in Sarah, and as you can see it's actually sorting. Let's type in Amar. As you can see it's working. So depending on what you type in, it will actually sort correctly and everything is working well. So this is actually how I'd actually create the basic different logics of how to sort information using combo boxes, having that search, and then filling a table, then adding double buttons to it. So this is actually how I'd follow the logic. So I hope there is a lot you learned in this session today. In the next video, I'm going to work on how we're going to work on the updating the table data and actually how to delete the table data. So that's actually going to be one of the videos coming up. Then I'm also going to make videos showing you how to export to Excel and how to export to PDF logic. So these are the videos that are actually coming up next in line. So stay tuned and be ready for when they come out. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope the video really helped you. If it did, feel free to share it with anyone that you can. And then if you're new to this channel, encourage join the community by subscribing. And then make sure to hit that notification bell so that you get updated every single time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video.